Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of They Tried to Bury Us. I'm Tamer Kattan, but this time, unfortunately, my mom, Kitty, is back in Los Angeles. I'm still in Massachusetts and Boston. I just finished the Women in Comedy Festival. I'm on my way over to Wilmington, North Carolina, but I was lucky enough to find a couple friends in Boston that I've known for a really long time that I thought would be great guests and that you'd love to meet. So I'm very excited to welcome my very special guest, Randy Valerio.
Hey, guys.
Hey, brother.
Hey, thanks for having me. I like
man?
the intro. Very professional of you.
Thank you.
Yeah, the intro on our podcast, Chase and I's podcast, is not that professional. It's usually me just talking, and then I say, "Oh, hey, welcome everybody." So I'm not.
What's your podcast called again?
It's called Ready Set, Blow. Yeah, but
Ready,
it's me and Chase Abel, giving our take on what's on starting out in comedy, and then and just what's going on in our lives. But then we do a little news at the end because Chase doesn't really read. I mean, he knows how to read. He just doesn't he doesn't watch the news or pay attention to anything. Yeah. So I find some fun stories and ask to get Chase's point of view.
That's great. Yeah. Well, it's a really great podcast, and I'm very honored to have been your first guest.
That's right. You were our first guest way back. I remember we taped that episode in Chase's apartment, which we don't normally do. So we were down at his apartment taping that, and it was after a show. We had a few cocktails.
Oh my god!
We're like, let's call it something.
I remember that now.
And I think it was just after old Donnie won.
That's
right.
And
it was very rattling.
I was so angry. Oh my god! I remember that. Well, I remember it briefly because we were pretty intoxicated.
Yeah.
And it was
that was definitely the drunkest podcast. It came out fine. It came out great.
Yeah, it came out great.
That was definitely the most loaded I was on a podcast. We've had guests be more loaded than that, but
that's good to know. Yeah. That's good to know.
We had one guest pass out in the middle of the.
You got to be kidding!
Oh yeah! Shout out Trish Hall. You probably know her. She's a great comic. She got a little bit too excited, so we interviewed her friend who was also here.
That's great. Well, way to go. Way to have a plan B. In case a comedy guest gets too drunk, welcome plan B. That's great.
Exactly.
Well, dude, I'm super excited to be back in Boston. One of the weirdest things about being a comic. Well, first let me introduce you probably. You're a comedian and a podcast host.
Yep.
And someone that I hope moves to LA soon.
Yeah, that's
fingers crossed.
Yeah, you've heard it here first. That's the plan. I gotta figure out when and how. But
right on.
I want to do a stretch out there. It's worth a shot.
Good. Well, you will have friends waiting for you.
Oh, thanks, bud.
And it's a great city. It's highly underrated, I think, in a lot of ways, and highly overrated in other ways.
Yeah.
Because I think LA is sort of like a buffet style restaurant.
I like that.
And some people are like, "Oh, I hate what's on my plate." And I'm like, well, it's your fault for which sections you went to.
Well, that's the thing that I feel like this. I feel like I have that same sort of feeling because that's why, like, when I travel to other countries, I did Lebanon and Colombia this year.
Wow,
fantastic. But when I go places, like when people are like, they go to LA, like, oh, the pizza sucks here. It's like, we don't go to LA for fucking pizza.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, it's like you go to New York for like good Chinese takeout. Like you know what to expect. Like I didn't go to Beirut like demanding a fucking Applebee's.
Oh my god, this is such a great
ridiculous.
Point. This is such a great point you're making. When an American leaves one state for another state, they complain that the pizza's not as good.
Yeah, it's like what? Like,
but no one immigrates from one country to another country and says, I like the freedom, but the pizza's shit. The hummus here is garbage.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't hear a lot of my Middle Eastern friends shitting on hummus in the United States. They celebrate what they got, not what they don't.
The freedom is nice. The opportunity is great. I like that my daughter is treated like a human being, but the hummus... Forget about it.
My daughter's treated like a human being.
You call this hummus? It's weird, right? They complain about the weirdest things. But yeah, LA would love to have you. And you're one of the guys I always talk about when I'm in LA. Like when I talk about Boston, it's like it's so good to come to a place and have comics that you're friends with and that you connect with and always have a good time with.
Oh yeah.
So I think it'd be great for you. And you travel around opening for Jeff Dye.
Yeah.
Which is one of my favorite comics. I think he's such a great comic, such a good person.
Yeah.
And I've been so stoked seeing you on social media, popping up all over the place, going up in great clubs. It's so
that's
great,
the best
man.
part. That's the most fun part for me. Is like obviously getting to do the time is great and going to these legendary clubs, but like meeting the features and the MC and the other comics in town, like
yeah,
'cause that's how I met you, man. I mean, you were on the World Series of Comedy,
yeah,
and I remember we met because it was me, you, Chase, I think one other comic I'm drawing a blank on, and Adam Ray. Smoking weed outside of Laugh Boss.
That's right. Yeah, I actually featured for him that weekend.
I know, and like meeting those guys. That's how I've gotten to go back to some of these cities.
Yeah,
like,
that's
hey,
so great.
I'll talk to the feature. I was like, hey man, I get some time in town. It's like, oh yeah, I'll set you up over here.
That's great.
So
I remember that night because Adam went over to the Wilbur because Dana Carvey was filming his special for Netflix that night.
Oh no shit.
Yeah, actually, I ended up doing like a 35-minute set because Adam was running over from the Wilbur
It's like to do a little feature spot there.
Well, he has a great podcast with Brad Williams, and so he wanted to bring Dana Carvey on stage with him towards the end of his set, and so he went to the Wilbur, to be a good host and be like, hey, I'm going to come watch you film. It's a pretty big moment for Dana Carvey to be doing live stand-up.
First time in a long time.
First time in a long time. So he went there, but as happens with TV tapings, it was a little bit late, so I did an extra long set that night. So I remember it was a really fun night.
Yeah.
To connect with you guys and meet him and meet Dana Carvey. Avery, shout out to Avery Pearson too, was there doing comedy and also supporting on the keyboards.
Nice.
It was a fun night. I love Laugh Boston. It's a great club.
Excellent club.
So, and let me say something.
Yeah.
You said something about featuring for Jeff, which I think is really interesting. You said, "Oh, I was lucky."
I'm not always featuring for him in all these clubs too.
Okay, well, or doing guest spots.
So that's the thing. Like I started doing guest spots.
Yeah.
And then sometimes they let me host. And
that's
then
great.
but that's what he's like. Yeah, just
sure.
I told him like, hey. He invited me on the road. He's like, it doesn't matter how much time or what. I was like, dude, if you give me 2.5 minutes, I'm fucking flying. Okay,
See?
I'm going.
And that is exactly what I wanted to get into. Is you've got such a great attitude, you've got a really strong work ethic. You left your day job a couple years ago, and now you're pursuing comedy full time. And I don't hear that. I feel that.
Oh,
you know what
thanks,
I'm saying?
Man. Thanks, dude.
I remember what it's like. I know how scary it is.
Oh, it's terrifying.
It is. It's a terrifying
that's what's exciting.
thing.
It's like, oh man, can I make magic happen? Can I create something out of thin air, like a career that would not exist if I just didn't demand that people pay me to do this eventually?
It's great to gamble on yourself instead of a hand of cards.
Yes.
Right? It's a great thing to be able to gamble on yourself.
Yeah.
But here's what I noticed about you right away.
Yeah.
Is that I know a lot of comics, but there's certain comics that have a different work ethic than other kinds of comics. Yeah. And I think it's the luck and bad luck of being an immigrant sometimes is that you have this crazy work ethic.
Yeah.
And I think it's because of where we came from. Sometimes you don't have these opportunities, you don't get these experiences. So because of what we witnessed, because of what we went through, we work extra hard.
Yes.
And then and we're unlucky to grow up in those places, but also there's a silver lining where it pushes you.
Yeah, I mean, it teaches you lessons that you couldn't learn otherwise.
Exactly.
Nothing. For anything to change, there has to be a catalyst, right? Mm-hmm. So having obstacles forces you to grow. I
100%.
mean, and of course you can force yourself to grow, but but if you don't have another choice, I mean, the level of motivation is higher
100%.
For someone who doesn't have that many chances to fuck up, as opposed to someone who could fuck up 1,000 times and still land on third base. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a different motivating factor.
But here's the thing that I love about you and I think makes you special. You were born here. Mm-hmm. You were born in Queens.
I was born in White Plains Hospital. I grew up in a community called Ridgewood, Queens. It's I was talking about this last week.
It's where Eddie Murphy came to find his woman.
That's right.
in coming to America.
Where does a king find his queens? But anyway, so Ridgewood's like right on the border of Bushwick and Queens. So like you kind of, I was saying last week, it's like the only place you could, I think, walk to another borough in New York City. Like you have to cross a body of water. You can't just walk over.
Oh wow!
So that's where I was raised. But my father was an immigrant. He came here from the Dominican Republic. I think it was like 1977 or something like that.
I love the Dominican Republic.
He came on a banana boat.
Get out!
Like on a fucking boat. They had planes. He came into Ellis Island. It took like 2 weeks or whatever to fucking float up here.
Mm-hmm. 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, because they made stops.
Wow.
Yeah, because he was like steerage class. It wasn't
because
like
the DR. It's not like for people who don't know geography. Like even the trip from Cuba,
it's farther than Cuba
to America is fine, but the DR is it's the deep Caribbean. It's not a short. It's a long trip.
Yeah.
I actually spent time there. I flew there. When I was a kid, I worked at Club Med in Punta Cana for like a year. And so I know the DR really, really well because also all my friends. I didn't make friends with other.
What was it like partying at a Club Med as a young man in the DR?
We'll get into that.
I can't even imagine.
We'll get into that next. I'll tell you. Okay. But first I want to talk about you. So your dad came over on a banana boat.
Yeah.
From the Dominican Republic. I almost said from the DR because that's what they call the DR. On a banana boat, and after 2 weeks, how old was he at the time?
I think he was 14, 13 or 14. He like left school to start working in like, 6th grade. So he worked for a couple of years down there to make some money to come up here because I think my grandfather came up first. My grandfather came up a few months before him. Then my father was the oldest son. So then he went, then my grandmother, and then they started sending the younger boys up. Because my father's like one of 6, 5 boys and a girl.
Yeah. What an adventure for a 14-year-old, right?
Well, I couldn't believe just leaving another country. I'm saying he stopped going to school at 6th grade, right? Gets here and starts working immediately. So he's illiterate in 2 languages, can't speak the local language. It's like, how the fuck? Like in terms of like obstacles, like I'm over here bitching and moaning, like, my savings fund are dwindling from fucking around for 3 years. Woe is me. It's like my dad couldn't speak the language and was broke. So I couldn't even imagine like getting over those kind of humps.
It's crazy.
But a great story that I was telling a friend of mine last night, or the night before last, actually, because they were asking about my past. I was like, I was telling funny stories about my dad. So when he came on the boat, right, it's a bunch of other guys and kids talking and shit. So they're all talking about like, America.
Do you know what the boat was like?
It was like a fucking shitty steerage boat, dude. I mean, it was like bunks,
Wow. So just a bunch of people packed in.
Yeah. I mean, it was like whatever the cheapest form of transportation from the Dominican Republic to here.
Sure.
And that's what it was. Like there was passengers on the boat, so it wasn't like he was like stowed away. Like they knew he was on there because he got a passport, or he had a visa to come to the country.
Yeah.
But it was Greyhound on water, dude. It was just living in that. It smells like a urinal. I'm sure it was fucking disgusting.
Yeah.
But they tell stories in the book. They're like, what it's like in America, what they heard about America.
Oh my gosh.
So my dad kept hearing from them like, in America, this guy kept saying, in America, you can find gold in the streets. You can find gold in the streets, right? So my dad gets here and fucking immediately takes off and disappears, right? Disappears for a day, comes back, to the apartment they were living in Corona, Queens, and of course my grandparents were worried. So what are worried, immigrants do when they find their son who went missing? They beat the shit out of him.
He scared the crap out of him.
I know, but that's also a really weird reaction. Like I missed you, pop. Getting punched in the face or whatever. But they beat the shit out of him, and they asked him like, "Where were you?" Like, he got in a lot of trouble. Yeah. And he's like, "I was walking around looking for gold in the streets." And my grandma goes, "What? Come again?" He's like, "Yeah, they said on the boat you can find money in the streets."
He's just a kid.
Yeah. Like, you can find money in the streets. So I was just wandering around, see if there was any money in the streets.
That's so funny, especially when you don't know the language.
What do you know? Yeah.
And somebody uses like a metaphor, which is, let's be honest, metaphors are kind of like the most complex version of a language. He doesn't even know English great yet. And they're using these metaphors about gold in the street. He's like, literally, there's gold in the street.
Yeah. But also to think that that's actually like to have that view of America, it's kind of
so romanticized.
Yeah, it's a very romantic view. It's like, oh man, it can really be money in the street. Like, all right.
One of my friends said this thing. I mentioned this on another episode where I was in New York one time and a friend of mine was with me and we were walking down the street and he grabbed my arm and stopped me. And I look up and I'm like, what? And he goes, that's the Empire State Building. And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is his first time seeing the Empire State Building in real life. And he said, he's like, I think all of us are aware that there are people and then celebrity people. Yeah. But I don't think that in America you're aware that there are countries and celebrity countries.
Wow. That's a great metaphor. So speaking of metaphors.
He goes, America's a celebrity country and the Empire State Building is the Madonna of your country. Yeah. And he goes, I've seen this in movies my whole life.
Yeah, think about that. It'd be like seeing the Great Pyramids, dude. Being from Egypt, it's like, shit, man, I've seen those 1,000 times because I loved all those history documentaries and shit. Like, and I've never been to Egypt, so I'd be like, wow, fucking there they are. To actually be in the presence of that. Yeah, it's very true.
So I imagine your dad, for a 14-year-old. Well, he gets to America now. His parents are there. He gets there. He hears this romanticized version of the street. But he must have been a little bit of a wild child to go, I'm just going to go.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Go out in the street. Is that...
He was a fun-loving guy back in the day, you know. I don't know. You know, my father and my mom got together. So my mom's, so Irish, a German-Irish woman from New York. You know, her parents are, like Depression-era Brooklyn residents, and then they moved out to Long Island when they had her young and whatever. But they met. And when they met, my dad was like 17 or 18. He was a baby, you know?
Wow.
He was like 4 years in. Like, you know, if he got here in 75, it must have been 79. He was just turned 18 or was 17 or going on 18 or something like that.
To be 18 in 1979 in New York?
Yeah. Oh, I got photos. I got photos of them. I can share with you if you want to post them.
Hell yeah. Absolutely.
I got some gems of him on my phone.
That's the photo I want to use when we plug the episode.
Fine. Go for it, dude.
That's got to be the greatest era in New York. I mean, it was probably a very tough time to live in New York.
Oh yeah, dude. It was the worst time to live in New York. Actually, I remember. It's like this is 83 when I was born. But this time my dad was all of 20 years old. My mom was 25. She was a few years older. So I remember when I say I don't remember my father's youth, I do remember his youth as my parent. Because I remember
he was still young.
Yeah, I remember being in kindergarten, like you do show and tell, like what does your mom do? What does your dad do? How old is they? And, like say my dad was like 23, like something like that. Some ridiculously young age where like I would be, like completely unfit to have a kid at 23. He had 2 or 3 at that point.
Wow.
But before that, he and my mom met at a nightclub. I think it was like either Studio 54 or 2001 Odyssey. One of the famous New York nightclubs.
That's so cool.
One of the famous New York, I was in the late 70s.
This is such an interesting thing because what you said is right. It was a really hard time to live in New York.
Yeah.
But at the same time, some of the most amazing cultural things.
Yeah, I mean,
were
the disco
happening
70s, dude.
Right?
A memorable time, a lot of memorable music. I mean, I think the first song that they danced to was "I Want to Rock with You" by Michael Jackson, who's now just more than fallen from grace. But and they were like all into the Bee Gees and that shit. Wow. So the photos, you'll see my dad just with the gold chains and the silk shirt and the giant fucking afro with the big hat on top.
I used to have a giant afro. I miss it. Dude, I look so cool. My shadow looked like Hello Kitty was following you.
Dude, I couldn't even imagine you with hair. It would be so weird.
I'm going to show you a picture.
I saw the photos of you when you were a bodybuilder. I'm like, that is just alarming. I can't believe that's the same person.
Yeah.
Not that you say you're out of shape now, but it's a completely different.
I was a freak.
Well, no, I mean, that's so I used to lift. I still lift weights.
You're still buff. You're super buff.
But I was lifting a lot of weights in high school. Like I don't know, I was more doing that. Just the phases in your life you go through. It's like, oh, look at Tamer in a completely different phase than I know. It's like a very jarring thing to see someone in that spot.
That's one of the weird thing about being an immigrant.
Yeah,
is I think when my friends talk about when they recall their youth, they remember a younger version of themselves. And I remember a different person.
Yes.
I wasn't.
That's how I think about my past, Tamer. It's so funny you mention that because I feel like I've had 9 lives. It's like, that was that portion of my life, and that's dead. And that was this portion of my life. That's still going on. It's like I have the same heart, and I have all the memories, but I'm not the same person as that person.
Sure.
I feel like I've changed enough where I wasn't the same. It's like, That was that moment, and that's sort of a different moment now,
So tell me about how your parents met.
Yes, so they met at at one of the big famous New York nightclubs. I don't know if it was Studio or one of those.
So he'd been here about 4 or 5 years or so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Didn't speak that. He still can't speak English properly. I mean, he can get by, but he's not fluent.
There's so many Dominicans.
They all speak Spanish. Yeah. He didn't have to. Because they were coming over in droves.
Like my mom, for example. My mom still has an accent, which I love. And Mom, please don't ever lose your accent. But I'll tell you what, I think in the last 10 years, my mom's English has spiked in terms of improvement because she used to work at a golf course where it was a lot of immigrants work there.
Yep.
And now she works at a golf course where she's the only immigrant. And because she has so many American friends now, and because of the internet too, now she's tweeting and on Instagram and Facebook, she's like, her English has skyrocketed.
Nice.
Her English is so much
she's
better.
Tweeting. I guess she's got the fans and shit.
Oh my God, dude. She sends me emojis. It's crazy.
Well, I remember telling my mother, I was like, when this was probably like 5 years ago, because I'm terrible about keeping up with the family. Just because I'm always out doing something else. So I'll call home, like a couple times a month.
And comedy's a jealous girlfriend. Comedy, it's really hard to be a comic and make time for other things. Like when you're a doctor, people don't go, "Oh, he's a flake. He didn't get back to me."
That's exactly right. They assume like, oh, because your job seems fun, it's not actually a job.
And it is.
It's like, no,
it's
I mean, just because I
hard.
enjoy doing it doesn't mean I'm sacrificing other things I would also like to do.
Exactly. It's so hard. People don't realize like you're the CEO of your own company, but you're also the janitor of your own company, and you have to do everything.
I spend hours editing the podcast, and I don't even edit shit out. I'm just like making sure the levels are right, and like videos. Is this funny? Do I want to make a clip of it? Like, but that shit takes all time, and then you got to travel. You're on the road. Yeah. Then you're traveling to fucking all over East Jesus nowhere to get stage time.
And what people don't realize is like they're like, oh, your manager must hook you. I'm like, no, my manager doesn't do anything.
Dude, you have a manager. I don't even have a fucking. I'm over here doing it all, all myself.
No, but even managers. I mean, managers. There's nothing wrong with this. I understand the way the business is. Managers, like at the level that I'm at, it's not like managers are like saying, "Hey, I'm gonna book you shows on the road."
Of course not. Yeah,
he's helping me out with bigger dollar things, like trying to get on TV shows, submitting writing packets, getting into JFL, things like that. Yeah, but for everything else, I'm on my own.
Getting stage time.
So you have to. One, you have to first you have to keep track of all the festivals that you want to get into or not get into, all the clubs that you want to get into.
Getting into the festivals.
Right. It's a great way to network. It's more, who cares about winning or whatever, when it's a competition.
That's my next thing I want to start doing to the festivals.
It's a great way to meet other comics.
Yeah, that's what I loved about doing the first year on the road.
And that's huge. But what people don't realize is you got to keep track of that, when they are, when the submission deadlines are. And then if you get in, then you're like, stoked, I got in. Now I got to, coordinate my schedule. Now I got to get a place to stay. Now I got to coordinate my flight. And now that I'm already out east and I paid for this long flight, well, now let me try to book other things out east. Now I got to book another flight or a car rental. Now I got to book a hotel. Now I got to, coordinate with the manager of the club. All these other things. It's a lot of work. And people don't really, they look at us and they think like, oh, that's such a fun job. And it is. We're very lucky to do what we do.
Especially doing it. Once you're doing it, like once your name's called and you're getting up, it's like, this is fucking, all that was more than worth however many minutes I'm up here.
It's totally worth it. It's totally worth it.
Yeah, that's like, great.
But I think it's a lot more work than people think.
Oh, for sure.
And managers are not a silver bullet. They're there. They have their job.
Well, there's no one thing is what I've been told by every comic that's ahead of me in this game. It's like there's no one thing that's going to put you over the edge.
And now more than ever.
That you've seen, but that's not going to get you. That's not going to build it. You can't build a career on it. You have to have a book and you have to have like a long list of slow, steady achievements to get to where you want to be.
I mean, back then, man, back in the 80s and 70s, 80s, 90s even, you could get on Johnny Carson, and that's it.
Yeah.
You've got a career now. Yeah. Everything's done. And now you have to make it every 6 months. Yeah. You have to make it. You have to make it twice a year.
Because somebody else will come up. Right? All right, he's more interesting now. It's like,
exactly.
whoa.
There's so
I'm
many.
funny again.
Yeah, exactly. You do, and it's a hustle. But But the thing that I like is the cream rises to the top. It's the hardest workers, and the thing that I like about the hardest workers is they're also the ones that tend to have the most passion and love for comedy. So sometimes it being more difficult is actually a good thing. It's a blessing in disguise. And I have a feeling that some of your work ethic came from the stuff that your dad came through.
100%. I mean, I was talking about it recently with Chase. Getting out of my desire to go to college and get into finance and build that career and try to sort of chase that brass ring that that America tells you should, or at least a lot of mainstream society says. Was watching not only how hard my dad worked to be better than his father was, or just to leave the Dominican Republic, which was. I was telling you a little bit before the show. It's running water, dirt floors, just shitting in a trough, like
crazy,
like a peasant farmer, real
people
peasant farmer.
People don't realize what life is like outside.
To have an actual roof over your head, electricity, enough to pay the bills, to have a kid that goes to college. So it's like for me, watching him get to where he got, but then more importantly, being scared that I don't want to be like him. I didn't want to stay. I don't want to. He's a janitor. That's just fine. Yeah. But he was like, he had to take shit from his boss. He couldn't quit. He had responsibilities. Like he was sort of trapped in his life in a way that like, oh, I could do better than, or I want to do better than. I don't want to be restrained. Like he got rid of a lot of restraints. Right? Like I said, he had electricity and a family that was taken care of. You know, like so. That's the thing. But then I didn't want to stay in New York. I was like, I got to leave here. The world's bigger than this. I want to sort of spread my wings a little bit more. Sure. And being scared to be trapped like him in a dead end job is what I didn't want to do. Sure. It's also why I left finance, because I felt like eventually I wasn't betting on me. You know. Yeah, but a lot of people don't realize, like, you hear someone has a job as a janitor and you go, oh, that's the worst job ever. But it's not. It's not the worst job ever. Here's a guy who came from another country on a boat and had to learn a language, had to learn a culture, had to miss his family, had to reconnect and learn everything new all over again. Yeah. And now he has a job where he's getting paid. He's doing an honest day's work. Or he's not fucking dead, like some of his relatives have been, getting into crime or whatever. Like exactly, he did it. Yeah, he even I know people who are doctors that drive cabs in America that were doctors in their home countries. But I've met dozens of people like that, dude. And it shows you how lucky we are that America is. Of course, we have flaws and we have complaints and we have a lot of stuff that we need to make better. Yeah, but to show you how great America is you could have an amazing job in your home country and come to America and do a job here that would be considered not a great job or quote unquote dead end job, and still be able to do more for your family and more for your children and elevate your kid to a level that even a doctor couldn't elevate his kid to back in the Dominican Republic. Yeah. That's precisely pretty amazing. Exactly. I mean, and that's like, it's why I give my father a lot of credit for that. Because I think, I forget who was talking about it recently. I was listening to some podcast, but like, because could you imagine doing it in reverse? Like, I couldn't imagine me going to the Dominican Republic and being a doctor down there. Like, I couldn't just go and learn Spanish and become a fucking engineer down there. Like, or any other country. Like, if I just went to, am I going to go to be an investment banker in Germany? No, I don't speak fucking German. Like that alone, that barrier alone is hard to cross. Let alone coming there penniless. You're right. Like completely broke. And even if you were an American that had to go to another country, and even if you were penniless, it would still be easier for you. Oh, yeah. You know why? Yeah, because I'm an American. Because you're an American. Yeah. And America is considered a luxury. With an education. Which my father did not have, as I said. Even if you didn't. Yeah. Even if you went to another country as an American, America is considered a luxury brand. Yeah. Oh, you're telling. Yeah. You know what I mean? And when we come from places that are developing nations like the DR or Egypt, there is like a weird I guess there's a little bit of jealousy, but also like that weird respect. Like, oh, he's an American. Yeah. Like, what is that? And it's just by luck of birth. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I did nothing to deserve that. Do you know how much better this country would be if instead of people having angry like pride and a sense of entitlement, instead they felt like a sense of fortune, like honor. Like, I'm so lucky. I'm so honored to be born here. And that's what makes me happy about this podcast is not necessarily just when immigrants say thank you for doing it, but when Americans say, I love this podcast because it makes me love America even more. Absolutely. And I'm like, thank you. That's great. That's what it should feel America's like. It's really a set of ideals. Like that's the other thing too. Like the American ideals are what's American, not. There's a lot of people in America that hate America, and that doesn't make them like, but they're still Americans because they have the chance to fucking express that opinion. Yeah. Like it's a set of ideals that I think even exists outside of here. I mean, I met a woman in Colombia last month. Went down to the beach, and she was working the cabana. She's like the cabana girl getting drinks or whatever. Yeah. And like straightening up and cleaning up. And she was like, yeah, I'm saving up to go to America. Like I'm finishing college. I have to make sure my mom is taken care of here. So she had like a 10-year plan to get up to go to America, and she was like raving about it, asking what it was like, and I was like, man, she's more American than half the assholes I run to around here, man. You know what I'm saying? Like she seems to be excited about the opportunity to do something up here. She may not be, to see what it's like, that's right. She may not be made in America, but she's made of America. Exactly. And good for her, man. Exactly. That's awesome. Exactly. I love hearing stuff like that. Yeah. So let me ask you this. So now your parents get together. Your dad. How did your dad, after only being in the country a few years, hook up with a hot German-Irish American? I mean, the rumor has it that he was hitting on some of her friends and family members to getting good with her.
Like to try to make nice.
Yeah, they had to like getting close with my mom, and I guess I guess he just broke her down somehow. I don't know what the fuck he said or did. I mean, I can't even imagine how much how much worse his English was back then than it is now. So I have no idea. You'd have to ask my mom that. Maybe I'll have her on my podcast someday and ask her that.
Well, you should.
I
would listen to that. I would listen to it like 3 times. I love like romantic stories between like people from different cultures.
Yeah,
because that's the language of love. When you can't express language the way your mind and your heart wants to, you kind of have to do it through your eyes and your soul.
Yeah,
that's a real game. That's when you're a real player.
Yeah, or they were just on drugs. Could be both. I don't know. No, I think my mom was pretty square. I know my dad partied a little bit. I think my mom's pretty fucking square. But they were never married. Together for 17 years. They split up. Yeah, they split up when I was 12 or 13, something like that.
17 years. They were never married.
Never married.
Wow.
Just had 3 kids together. And yeah, I mean, my dad was, like I said, a charismatic guy, a likable guy, but not the best father in the world, and certainly not the best life partner.
Yeah.
So so that ended up falling apart. But we had I remember most of my youth was like fucking normal shit, man. Like, dude, we had to be inside every night for dinner. But like fucking like literally every night. I remember come inside to eat, and then I go back out in the summertime.
Did you feel different? Like, because you're one step more American than me.
Yeah.
Right? Because I came here from another country, but you had an immigrant parent.
Yeah.
But you're very American, obviously. I mean, you didn't grow up with an accent or anything like that.
No.
But did you ever feel different for having a parent that didn't speak perfect English or spoke with an accent?
Well, what's funny is that growing up in New York, I almost felt too white. Like I was like too. He thinks he's better than us because he's half white, kind of. Because Ridgewood's a fucking Puerto Rican, Dominican. It's a very mixed neighborhood. So like
it was almost as if you were the immigrant.
Yeah, it was almost like I wasn't like, and I hung out with mostly Spanish kids, so I was like, I don't know, like being like seemed like the shittier, like the more Latin and like the harder you grew up, like the cooler you were back at that point in my life. Like I don't know what that was about, but since I hung out with mostly Spanish kids, like my girlfriends were all Latin women, one was from Ecuador, one was from Puerto Rico. Sorry, that's probably Chase.
Okay.
Like they It was, so like there was some. I never quite fit in because I wasn't completely Dominican. I wasn't completely white, so I didn't have like a. It's like dude, New York City's like a prison yard.
Yeah.
Like everyone kind of just hives off in their own like racial, cultural.
Oh, that's so funny.
And for me, it was like, well, fuck, man, I don't really fit in perfectly to either of these groups.
Yeah.
So I kind of floated around a little bit,
Yeah.
But that also like sort of broadened my horizons, which I loved.
Yeah. Here, should we? Let's pause.
That's fine.
Okay.
Ask the next question.
Oh, cool. Oh, yeah. Okay, that's easy peasy.
Yeah.
That's great. I like that. Yeah, Chase can figure. It's gonna change.
Chase, I'm buzzing you now.
It's gonna take like 20 minutes to get up this 5th floor walk up.
Oh, he gotta take time. He always takes a phone call by the 2nd floor, dude. Kid's fucking.
That's great.
Like that. Yeah, so there was so you're asking about.
That's so interesting,
sort of
dude.
mixed like that.
It's so funny because people don't realize that. Like, it's not like America is so diverse that you can be a person who could pass as like a natural born American and feel like an immigrant because the community you live in is more Latin or more Arabic or more whatever.
And I identify, oddly enough, as like more. Like from my youth, I identify more as like I check Hispanic, Latino on boxes like that's how I identify. But I know.
Are you proud? Are you proud of your Dominican heritage?
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
that's
great.
I've
always been proud of it. I'm not like embarrassed by it or anything. But then I went to a great college, an Ivy League University. So like.
Where'd you go?
I went to Brown University.
Wow.
Yeah. So I got polished there, like and that almost made me more American. In a really weird way.
Hey, Chase.
What's up, bud? That's. Like I said, I was kind of on like two sides of the fence, at the same time, which was kind of crazy.
It's so funny because I feel like you have the same sort of like I used to get stretched back and forth between am I Arabic, am I American, and even though I was born in another country, I feel like you felt that same tension.
Of course, yeah. Well, the best part too is like a very stark example for that. I should say for me was. I remember everything I said. So in a weird way, like up until I was 12, up until my parents split up, like we had like a very traditional upbringing. Like we were poor in New York City, living in an apartment,
Yeah.
But we all lived together. We, like I said, we all ate dinner every night at, 7:00. I'd come back in the summertime to eat, and then I'd go back out for a little while.
Yeah.
And, and then every week on Thursday nights, we'd go to my father's mother's house, my father's grandparents' house, so his parents' house in Corona, which is like a heavily Dominican neighborhood where everyone only spoke Spanish. We'd have Spanish food, and we'd spend the night, hanging out there.
Yeah. Coño.
Yeah, all that shit. But then on Sundays, every Sunday night, we'd go up to my mother's parents' house in Austin, New York, which was we call it upstate New York, but it was just fucking Westchester County. It was like literally a suburb of New York. We just drove like an hour up to this place.
Yeah,
and it was a small house, but it had grass, which we didn't have. We'd go sleigh riding in the yard in the winter.
If you have a yard in New York, oh my god!
So to us, it was like the countryside. To us, it was like the countryside, and we'd had and then we'd have like boiled ham and potatoes and shit, and it'd be very like squeaky clean white goofy, just shit like that, like
boiled ham.
Yeah, it was a fucking gross shit. I never liked the food. I mean, I love my grandparents to death, but food was too bland for me. The food at my Spanish grandfather's house was way better. Yeah. Or at least I enjoyed it more. But anyway, so like every week I'd be like, oh, I'd see that, and then I'd see that. It's like, what? So I get a stark reminder of like, all right, this is where your father's from. This is where where your father's trying to get to, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And I was literally stuck in the middle, like, in a neighborhood better than my grandmother's, but worse than my other grandmother's. Yeah. And just sort of going back and forth like that.
What an interesting thing to notice at a young age.
Yeah.
Like, I remember when we first immigrated to America, I had, we had people that we knew that were also Egyptian, but they lived in America longer.
Yeah.
So they lived in a better neighborhood than we lived in. And I remember sitting in the back of a Datsun B210.
Okay.
It was a green car that I later was given in high school, and all my friends called it the green bean machine. The green bean machine. So I was in the back of this Datsun B210, and I'd look out this window, this little triangle back window, and I remember when we drove through the neighborhood that I lived in, you'd hear police sirens. You'd see, literally, this guy had a boxing ring set up in his front yard made out of garden hoses, and there were kids punching each other, boxing, and parents cheering them on.
Yeah.
And just, it looked aggressive and tense. And then we started driving to their neighborhood, and it was nice.
Yeah.
And there were these like perfect lawns, and there were no weeds, and there were like people in, there were chaise lounge chairs, and it just looked nice and and I noticed from the back seat of that car, I could see the difference in socioeconomic class on a short 30-minute drive.
Yeah, but even not knowing like those words as a kid, you thought like the tension. There was like in my neighborhood, it was always a little bit like you never really knew what's gonna happen.
That's such a great point.
What could happen?
Yeah,
but like you leave the city, and it's like, oh, nothing could ever happen up here. Like that, like the thought of like, oh, it would be weird if something,
I love that you said that. That's such a great point.
That's the vibe. It was like everything was like a coiled snake in New York City for me. It's like everything's fucking. Even when I go back now and I go visit my mom because she still lives in the same neighborhood in Ridgewood, just like and it's getting nicer now much nicer now than it was in my youth because it's getting gentrified. But like it's like it's just, I don't know, like my shoulders get tight. It's like you're always like, all right, we're looking around, like that's just out of instinct.
You're right. There's this really great quote that I like. It says, "Knowledge is only a rumor until it lives in the muscle." Wow, that's dude. You know a lot of great quotes, dude. Well, I'm getting up there. I read a lot of books. I was an only child. I didn't have any brothers, so I just said, like, this book is my brother. But I think there's a real truth to that. It shows that even when you're a kid, you could have like these pretty sophisticated thoughts and sophisticated understandings, not necessarily with what your brain thinks, but with your body feels. Like this primal thing where you go, I know. I don't have to be old to understand that there's tension in this neighborhood. Yeah, exactly. And I do remember that, dude. I remember when my parents Fresh Prince of Bel-Aired me. Away from the neighborhood, where I was getting jumped by gang members, and then they put me in this neighborhood that was, it was funny because the violence went down, but the drugs went up in the neighborhood they moved me to. That sounds like suburbia to me. Suburbia, exactly. So there were more white kids, less violence, but instead of weed being at the parties, now they had cocaine. Dude, that was a huge difference that I noticed too, going from New York City to Providence, going to college in Brown. All my friends sold drugs growing up, all of them. Yeah. None of them used fucking drugs growing up. So they were being sold, but like there was no. But then I get to Brown, there's fucking drugs everywhere. Wow.
No one saw. It was like just because we were all broke. You know, like growing up, it's like who could afford, you know, to get fucked up? Like maybe, like I said, maybe a little bit of weed, but like that was it. You know,
Yeah.
like, and then we'd get like beers at the bodega on credit. You know, like, but it wasn't fucking, you know, but and like no one's like, you know, breaking out all the like expensive pills. You know, like at a party, it's like the fuck you get that? Like no one could afford the shit.
So let me ask you, because I think it's so interesting because you're essentially an American that was an immigrant in America, kind of.
I guess it's sort of the way I was raised and the way I felt about it.
You grew up in this very Latin neighborhood, so even though you're born in America, it was as if you were an immigrant. In a way.
And I spent a lot of time around it with my father and his side of the family. I barely had a full conversation with my father's grandparents because they spoke zero English. To this day, you know, like, so it would always be like through my father. My father learned English with us.
Yeah.
We'd sit and watch Sesame Street together.
Me and my mom, too. That's so funny, dude. That's how my mom and I learned English. It was Sesame Street. We'd watch Sesame Street together.
PBS, man. Tons of PBS.
It was Sesame Street, and then right after was the Electric Company.
Yeah. And then I used to love Bob Ross, too, because they throw Bob Ross on.
That's right.
I love that. I wanted to be a painter for a little while because of Bob Ross.
Yeah.
That's how entranced I was.
You know what's funny? Whenever my grandmother came to town, she her English wasn't great, and my Arabic started to fade. Mm-hmm. And when she'd want to watch the news, I would get mad. And when I'd want to watch cartoons, she would get mad. And so there were two shows that we watched together where we would be in peace. And it was I Love Lucy.
I Love Lucy's great.
And Three's Company.
Oh, dude, Three's Company is one of my favorite, probably my favorite 70s comedy. Because I mean, I would watch it, howl laughing at John Ritter, dude.
Totally,
so good.
And you know what's funny about John Ritter and Lucille Ball? If you look at them, they're very similar. They're very similar in the sense that they're both so funny,
very physical.
But they're so funny visually.
Yeah, very physical.
They have funny faces. They both made funny faces, and they both have funny physicality. And both of those shows, once you learn the premise of the show, it's the same show over and over again.
He fucks up and fixes it. Like,
exactly. There was a misunderstanding, right? Everything is a misunderstanding. And so if you didn't know English, it was the perfect show to watch. Yeah. You know, and it was like, so I remember that too. It's so funny.
And I would watch Three's Company with my dad. Because that's something I did get from him too, watching a lot of comedies. He would let us watch fucking anything. I'd watch like Three's Company with him. We'd watch Married with Children together. I was like 5 years old. Like most of my friends as an adult were like, oh yeah, my parents would never let me watch that show growing up. I'm like, I watched it with my dad.
Yeah,
you know, like,
that's so true. I remember my mom got in trouble with the neighbors because we had, when cable TV first came out, there was a Z channel. There was HBO, Showtime, then there was the Z channel. And the Z channel was like a lot of independent films and foreign films. So my parents got the Z channel. And kids figured out that my mom didn't care if there was nudity on TV.
Well, because nudity's looked at completely differently in the rest of the world.
Exactly. Like in America, we'd rather show a guy stabbing a guy than show a boob.
Yeah.
And in a lot of other countries, they rate movies by violence, not by sexuality. So these kids figured it out, and they started coming over to my house.
Over at the Kattan house.
At the Kattan house, exactly. We'd see boobs. You know, we'd watch movies where in the 80s too, like, you know, there were a lot of boobs in movies in the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
And then a group of moms like came over and started yelling at my mom, and I was like, what? And I remember being a kid and being like, don't yell at my mom. What are you doing? And it was just a culture clash. They didn't get it. And my mom was like, what's wrong with a topless woman in a movie? Like, so you want him to watch a movie where a guy's getting shot in the face? And that means that doesn't bother you? But if your kid sees a boob in a movie, I don't understand. Yeah. And she was right. Yeah. She was right. It's crazy that like we're so afraid of sexuality here. You know, it's being in Boston. It reminds me of our Puritan, our ancestry.
That white Irish Catholic guilt,
right?
That just hangs over the country.
Yeah. So, how about? Do you remember a time when you think back in your childhood? What do you think was the toughest time for your family? Like your dad being an immigrant, your mom being an American, and you kind of being
probably them splitting up because that was obviously tumultuous. You know, so that's, but that was also a rough time for me because I was going through puberty. I was like a freshman in high school or whatever.
You didn't have your boobs yet?
I didn't have my boobs yet. You know, I'm trying, you know, I always create, you know, these sexual urges and shit, all the shit you normally deal with. And I was also super competitive with school. So I was very good at school because I sort of realized right away that that's a way you can get out. Like if you go to college, you can
did
leave.
Your parents teach you that? Were your parents real hard on you, or was
no? They were not at all. I was brutal with myself.
Why? Where did that come from?
Fear and inadequacy mostly. I mean, like that. To be like I said, I didn't want to be trapped like I felt my dad and my family were by the circumstance. Like I said, it wasn't perfect, but we were poor, but we were getting by.
Yeah.
But
other people were doing better.
Yeah, I didn't want to. Yeah, I wanted to do whatever I wanted to do, and to do that, you needed money. In my head,
Yeah.
But I was just competitive. I was a sore loser.
Yeah, me too.
I don't. Like if I try something, I want to be the best at it.
Sure.
So I was just maniacal about school, and it was also just good at it in the sense that. Well, yeah, I can make it into a game. It's like, I need to learn this to get 100 points. Like, that's why I'm good at video games. Like, I want to beat the game. Like, you just want to win.
That's great.
It's just one of those things. Like, this is the game. This is how you get 100 points. All right, I'll figure it out. I'll get 100 points. I don't know exam, get an A or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But so I sort of pushed on that, and that got me out to go to school and everything. But I forgot where we were getting the hardest time. That's the hardest time was I was dealing with trying to get into college, going through puberty, and my parents had a bit of a tough breakup. So all that was kind of going on at once.
Yeah, that's a lot for you. How old were you at the time?
This was between the ages of 14 and 16.
That's tough.
Yeah.
You know what's so crazy that I just realized? That's the age your dad was on that banana boat.
Yeah, dude, that's the thing. I mean, but that's what blew my. Like, when I was going into college, he was having his first child. Like, I was 17 going on 18 going into college. He was 17 and 18. And
Did you consciously? Were you consciously aware of that?
Yeah, and I was like, I'm not fucking doing that, dude.
Wow.
I'm not. I was like, I don't want to do what he had to do.
Isn't that
I'm
amazing?
not doing that.
Isn't that amazing?
And I would venture to guess if you asked him today, he'd be like, I'm glad because I didn't want to fucking do it. I'm sure he didn't choose at 17.
Sure.
To add to his list of problems or list of difficulties, not only transitioning to an American culture. But
in the DR,
have a family.
But in the DR, that's not. He wasn't wrong. He wasn't unusual. He wasn't too young.
No. In fact, the fact that he's in America already put him ahead of most of his contemporaries.
Exactly.
By a wide margin. The fact that he has an American green card.
Exactly. Like when I worked in the Dominican Republic, I worked in Punta Cana.
Yep.
And I worked at Club Med. But at a very early age, I've always loved immigrants. I've always just been fascinated by their stories. And
they usually like to have fun too. They're really fun-loving people.
Well, you know what it is too.
It's they cut loose. They're like, all right, we're having a good time now.
For sure. Well, that's a big part of it. Is that they felt more fun to me, but also. I was always told that I wasn't like everybody else.
Yes.
But then I'd meet an immigrant, and even though they were totally different than me, they made me feel like I was just like them.
Yeah.
And they were always welcoming to me. So when I was in my 20s and I worked at Club Med, which was an insane job, all the white kids stayed on the resort when we had a day off. And you had to speak at least 2 languages to work at Club Med.
I'm saying, and I'm sure the locals that worked at Club Med were in a higher class than those who didn't. Because they know English and they're working for an American company.
Exactly,
they're doing crazy well. They're getting paid in U.S. dollars. Wow, they're doing great.
They were doing great.
Yeah.
But what ended up happening is I was just a kid, and I felt like the Dominicans that I was meeting that were my age, they felt like adults to me.
Oh yeah. My dad seemed like an old man. But when I remember from my earliest memory of him, and he was 23 or whatever the fuck he was, 24.
I had friends that were like they had kids already, and they were like I was 23, and this other guy that was 23, he had a wife and 2 kids.
Yeah.
And then I remember one time we took the Guagua. The Guagua was a bus that took us from Punta Cana up to Santo Domingo, which is the capital. Yeah. And the Guagua would roll up. It was a free ride.
Oh, that sounds dangerous already.
Yeah, it was dangerous. It was a free ride, but there was a preacher on the bus. So it's free as long as you were willing to hear a sermon. And I remember the bus rolled up, and there were all these chickens attached to the bumper, like dead chickens attached to the bumper. And I got on the Guagua, and there was goats. It was like
a goat on the bus.
Goat on the bus, and then we get to Santo Domingo, and I was with my friend, and we went to a chicken fight, a cockfight.
Yeah.
And at the time, there was a guy running.
Which, by the way, sorry, Peter, but that's just commonplace.
It was
in Latin American countries.
They
don't think much of cockfights at all.
They didn't. Yeah, it was.
It's a local sport.
It's a culturally different thing.
Yeah.
And at the time, there was a guy running for office named Domingo.
Trujillo.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I remember the campaign was everywhere. It said "Tranquilo con Danilo." Everything's going to be calm with Danilo. And I got introduced to Presidente, which is the
best.
Dominican beer.
I still love love that beer.
And we went into this cockfight, and we were all sitting around in there. And you know, I was young. I didn't know anything about what was happening. I'd never been to a cockfight before. And one of the roosters or cocks or whatever you call it jumped into the audience.
They would fucking cut up somebody. That's dangerous, yeah.
Well, everybody ran.
Yeah.
But I was super drunk, and I just sat there. And this chicken ended up right next to me, sitting right next to me, staring at me, and I was staring at the chicken. And then this guy came from behind and grabbed it. It was almost like the chicken having a staring contest with me is what gave him the ability to grab it.
Yeah.
And then everybody started patting. The guy grabbed the chicken, put him in the middle of the ring, and everybody was patting me on my back, going, pinche loco pelon. This crazy bald guy, he's más fuerte. You know, saying, oh, he's so strong. And I'm like, what are these guys talking? Why are they complimenting me? I'm just sitting here drinking a beer.
Because you just didn't know how dangerous that thing was.
Exactly. And then the cockfight started, and there was blood all over the place. I'm like, oh my God. And I didn't realize that they had tied razor blades
to the back of their feet.
To the back of their feet. And that's why they thought I was a lunatic. They're like, this guy from Los Angeles, he's crazy. And I was like, no, I'm just stupid. I was just stupid. But I remember at a very early age going, wow, my 23 is very different than his 23.
Yeah, absolutely.
He was like, I remember he was telling me, he's like, oh, my daughter's going to school, and I want to make extra money this weekend so I could buy her a uniform. And I was like, I want to buy a burrito.
I know, right?
I had no worries compared to him, and it made me realize like my definition of reality. Everybody has different realities, you know, based on where they grow up, and it made me like have a lot of respect for him, you know, and like what your dad went through, and it's so impressive that you didn't just forget what he went through, that you remembered it, and that you used it to fuel your growth. Like, to me, we're in Beacon Hill, man.
Yeah.
You live in one of the nicest parts of Boston. You've done a great thing for yourself, and your dad was a peasant farmer from the DR. That blows my mind. That's so impressive, man.
Well, thank you.
I'm really proud of you. I believe in you, man.
Dude, I appreciate that.
Not just what you've done with your life, but what you're gonna do with comedy too. I think it's so great, dude. And fucking high five to your dad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And look, and I know you like to end. You told me a little bit about the format of the show. I know you like to end in a positive part.
Yeah. So let's hear the best.
But just for full disclosure, so I actually don't speak with him right now, and I had for 10 years. We had our own tough times.
Yeah.
When I was 25, we had more than one argument, but there was sort of a falling out, and it's for the best, because I told him, like, hey, I got to focus on my life. At that point, I was moving to Boston, trying to get married, doing all this shit that ended up not working out anyway. But ultimately, he gave me the space to do that. But more importantly, I don't.
What did he say when you said that? Because that's not a Dominican thing, what you just asked for.
Yeah. Well,
in the DR, you can't ask for that.
And he just said, all right, and I hung up the phone, and that was it. Wow. But the thing about it is, it's I don't harbor any sort of ill will towards him. I still love him for the man. I love him for what he did for me. I mean, and that's the thing. Like, I appreciate what he did for me. I rather focus on the fact that, man, like you just said, he came from a place where you have to dig a hole to take a shit every day.
Yeah.
And now I'm sitting here doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
In no small part because he came to this country, found my mother, started a family, stuck it out with us for as long as they can make it work.
Yeah.
And I got into college and did the things that I need to do to get time, money, and effort to spend on comedy now. So so I'm totally grateful for having that experience, because I mean, like, what am I gonna cry about spilled milk? Like, all that led me to here, and I'm happy here. Like, I can't wait to be doing to do this and try and make a career out of this. So so I'm grateful for what I've gone through. I'm not like bitter by it. I don't cry at night about it. It's like it's pretty fucking good. If I really think about it, because I have a lot of friends. And actually, I think you're gonna do an episode with Chase after this.
I am.
Who have had a lot worse than me. You know what I mean? So I have a lot of friends who don't have parents, who don't have have had a drug problem, who've had this problem, who've had that, who didn't go to college. It's like what a story to start from there to get to this point.
100%.
And I owe it to them, not only my father, but my grandparents and my mother's family, because they went through hell and back too.
Yeah.
to keep going and to try and you know and try and squeeze as much fun and joy out of this little ride we got
Absolutely.
left. You know,
listen, there's a lot of times where things feel there's a paradox.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you can love your dad, you can love your parent, but you can also realize I need to make some space.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think if my dad was alive, I don't think we'd be speaking. And my dad put me through a lot of shit, and I've spoken about this before. My dad was physically abusive with me, and I don't know that I'll ever forget that. I can't. It's affected every aspect of every relationship I've ever been in. I mean, the girlfriend I have now, bless her. I am not an easy person to be with. I do not trust people. I'm like a rescue animal.
Yeah.
I bark at things. I growl at things.
The same way, dude. That's why women that tend to date me are a lot of nurses, a lot of teachers, a lot of psychotherapists.
Me too.
They try to help me. I'm
oh
like,
my
no,
God,
no.
Do the same thing. Same thing with me.
It's like, do I like them or am I attracting them? I'm trying. That's something I talk about with my therapist.
Yeah, it's true. I think you do. I think you do find each other, and it's this very bittersweet feeling.
Yeah.
Where you love this man for what he gave you, but you also recognize that you need to make space in order for you to fully recognize your potential.
Yeah, but it also makes you realize your own flaws. It's like, we're all. That's the thing I always say, you know, on my podcast. You know, it's the sort of the thrust of it is, you know, we're humans, but we're flawed. We're not perfect. Like anyone who thinks otherwise is a psychopath. Like we're all a little bit fucked up, and that's okay. Figure out how you are and try to avoid the things that make you sort of spiral into that.
100%. I think the people who think they're perfect are the most fucked up people.
They're absolutely insane.
Those are the crazy people,
and they're also the least fun to be around, dude.
Yeah,
it's like, dude, because they're the ones who don't have a sense of humor. It's like, what the fuck you like. Yeah. Have a laugh, dude. Cut it out. Relax.
Yeah. Well, dude, I'm so proud of you. Does that sound weird?
It sounds weird coming from you because I respect you and I love you. But thank you so much, man.
Thanks. I know it feels weird. There's like a few comics that I've known since they started, and there is kind of a big brotherly dynamic.
For me, for sure, dude. That's what I was gonna say. I wanted to thank you because believe it or not, you inspired me in a lot of ways. Because there's not many guys. 100%, dude. There's not many guys. Guys like you and a Dean Del Rey who started even after I did as an older man coming into comedy, who had a whole life and a whole career, and you also had a similar career in corporate America, so you even have that more in common. Like, to put that aside and say, no, this is what I want my life's work to be. This is what I find joy in doing, and I'm going to find a way to make as much time for this in my life as possible. You're one of those guys, and you're super funny and super talented coming out of the gate.
Man.
So I was like, oh man, this guy's like he's got it, you know. And I've always looked up to you for that,
dude. That means a lot. It's going to make me grow hair back. That is true, man. I listen. The founding fathers were smart enough to say that our job is not. The goal of this country is not about happiness, it's the pursuit of happiness. And I think that's what people don't realize. Sometimes they ask, all the photographs at the end of marathons are when you're running through the finish line, but the real joy is just running the race.
Yeah.
It's just great to be running the race and great to be doing things that make us happy.
Yeah.
That's the real joy of coming from an immigrant background.
Absolutely.
Is when you're an immigrant, sometimes you don't get the luxury of making that choice, of pursuing what makes you happy.
Yeah. That's something I learned from my dad for 100%. It's like, 'cause I know he didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
That wasn't his passion. That's just what he had to do.
Yeah.
So now it's like, so I did what I had to do. Now I have a chance to do what I want to do. I better try hard, or else I'm an asshole if I don't.
Good man. So. That's great, dude. That I'm so proud of you for recognizing that and for putting 100% of your effort behind it.
Thanks, dude.
And if you were a set of cards, I'd gamble on you.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah,
let's hope it's a winning hand.
I would. And dude, is there anything you want to promote? Do you want to tell people how they can find you?
Yeah, find me. I'm on all the social medias at Randy Valerio. Instagram's my number one. So if you want to follow me somewhere, follow me on Instagram. That's my favorite one. That's the one.
At Randy Valerio.
At Randy Valerio. VALERIO. And then of course the Ready Set Blow podcast at Ready Set Blow podcast on Instagram, and then just follow us on iTunes or Stitcher or any other place you can find a podcast. We're everywhere.
Right on, man. Thanks so much for being a guest.
Thanks so much for this, bud.
And guys, thank you for listening to this special episode of They Tried to Bury Us live from Boston. Please continue giving us your great review, your 5-star reviews and comments and posts. It really makes a big difference. And if you're looking for live comedy, you can follow me on my brand new website at tamerkattan.com and at Tamer Kat on Instagram, at Tamer Kattan on Twitter. On the website, you'll see we've got a merch window there. We've got some shirts that are going to be available soon. The first ones are out now based on one of my jokes. It's called The Fresh Prince of Bahrain. It's a t-shirt with the Fresh Prince of Bahrain printed on it because we need more TV to represent immigrants. And then I'm going to have a They Try to Bury Us t-shirt soon for you guys to get. Thanks so much for all the support, and we'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye.
RSB Podcast, you fucking bitch.